Welcome to The Sidebar, a book club for the Nut Army elite. I'm David.
I'm Gabe. When I'm not gooning, I'm grooming.
And I'm Capitalissimo.
And tonight we have the nut man himself in our vices. Mr. Dan Baltic is on the pod. Welcome, Dan.
'Tis I, the nut man. It is great to be here. Thank you for inviting me on. It's a pleasure, gentlemen.
You ready to get cracked?
Cracked and cranked. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, obviously, for making the time to come talk to us. We all read NUTCRANKR, really enjoyed it. I've almost called you Spencer like 5 times already. So just a heads up, that might be something that affects you for a long time to come.
I'm only part Spencer.
There's a little Spencer screaming to get out of all of us, I think.
Absolutely.
A little one.
Yeah, maybe a big one in some of us.
Spencer is at least the OPSEC master. It's true. You have to respect it. Like he managed to write 400 something pages of screeds before he was found out by anybody. So
that's true. You know? And Crystal, I mean, she looked into a file called work stuff. Who would do that? And discovered the treatise. So, honestly, pretty good attempt at OPSEC by Spencer there. But, women, they do be prying.
That's true. Absolutely trifling.
Yeah.
No trust. And depending on how you read the ending, perhaps he has reached an OPSEC apotheosis where he was completely unmasked and then went back undercover to pursue the project once more. What was your, what did you feel like your intention was with the ending there? Or, obviously, did you feel like you were making it somewhat intentionally vague, whether or not Spencer had actually flipped?
And just to put it back in Gabe's framing,
right?
Remember, there's the grifter, the fallen messiah, and the eunuch ending. And this was the biggest debate we had last episode. I think there was a strong lean towards grifter. But Dan, I don't know if you're willing to put it to rest. I've heard rumors that there might be another NUTCRANKR getting cranked right now.
Yeah, no, I am cranking on the second nut. That's coming up. And with regard to grifter or fallen messiah, something between the two, honestly. I was a bit, I've heard it before from other people that they thought the ending was ambiguous to the extent that, whether he was continuing the project covertly or whether he had just completely sold out. And I had wanted to make that pretty clear that he had sold out and that the project had become the Spencer project, and he had essentially either realized or convinced himself that he, never really cared, or even if he did care passionately about his beliefs at one point, he realized that it was going to be a fool's gambit or whatever. And indeed, he had already went to prison and such. So there is certainly an argument that he, once again, someone who is always at any given moment trying to maximize his own, potential opportunities, that he realized that the project and the saving the historic West was not going to work. And he pivoted toward making money and, getting the best life for himself that was possible. But I think on a deeper level, what he realized was that was always what he kind of wanted, and that he just kind of embraced, abandoned his earlier values to the extent he ever had them, and embraced grifting. But that does not mean that he suddenly became woke or something. He most certainly did not. He, he hasn't had a change of heart in the least. His only change of heart is that he, no longer believes it is useful or incumbent upon him to try to achieve political goals in society rather than personal goals.
There we go.
I'm absolutely seething
got,
right now.
I knew
seething.
it. I knew it. You hadn't said anything. I knew it. I was right. I told you.
Eunuch bros. I don't feel so good.
Listen. That was my contribution. All right. I thought I was so clever with the eunuch.
You were very clever. It was a.
Oh,
it was
that
it was supported by the text. Yeah. It was supported by the text.
Because like I had not thought that. I mean, I just assumed that like if that's not true. Like I guess your testicle could be destroyed and you would continue to have live. I mean that wouldn't necessarily kill you, but no, like I didn't. But that does open up an interesting kind of area of inquiry.
I am so.
Yeah. Oh, go on.
Oh, so I was going to say, I'm very sad that this does mean that we will not get NUTCRANKR 2, The Left Nut of Darkness.
Yeah, no. I mean, like, both of his nuts are intact as far as, like, I assume that, like, maybe Tiny punched him in the nuts a bunch of times. But, I mean, the issue is more that, like, I didn't envision a world where Tiny did any, like, lasting damage on Spencer physically. But as I'm writing NUTCRANKR 2, I am running into the issue where I'm like, well, okay, how much has Spencer really changed? Because, well, like, clearly if he's, like, a successful grifter, he has grown in his social abilities and capabilities. So that has to be taken into account. But also just the trauma of, frankly, having been raped. I think in most, even Spencer, in most people, I think would be something that would be a life-changing event, difficult to move past. So I'm kind of like trying to figure out, it'll either like really work and it'll be like, despite his trauma, Spencer is still like kind of like hurtling onward, or I'm just like kind of like failing to fully take into account the gravity of what has occurred upon him.
No, I was about to say, in NUTCRANKR 2, he still has that kind of Faustian drive, even if it's purely selfish motivated, right? So, like, he's where the foundations of NUTCRANKR 2 is that, he is a de-radicalization expert, and I assume the comedy goes from here, his innate selfishness, and then the commentary upon the idea of radicalization. I assume that's a sort of a frame of the second part.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes and no. So, I mean, I've really just kind of started it out with, like, has a successful career as the de-radicalization specialist. He has that same girlfriend as at the end of NUTCRANKR, Margot Weisberg, and he is, living the life, feeling very good about himself, but he has a viral video type encounter that discredits him, and he loses that position, and I was actually trying to figure out I knew that it was going to blow up for him, and he would essentially. So the plot line is that he loses his de-radicalization speaker career, and he tries to become part of the Dime Square art scene.
Oh God!
Oh, no.
Oh, is there a Dasha cameo?
There might be, yeah.
Let's go.
That may very well be in the works. I'm writing a scene with him at a party right now. He might run into Dasha. But I was trying to kind of like figure out, well, what is the thing that's gonna like really, and it could have been anything, but I think I tweeted about this. Maybe I DM'd someone, I don't know. But you're probably familiar with in the news recently that sad activist, progressive activist guy who got knifed to death in Bed-Stuy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So I was imagining
by his catamite, correct?
Yes. And no.
That's the other one. Yeah, this is the one on the street with the friendly trash can flipper.
Yeah. So he just runs into a young scholar late at night, and the fellow, he tries to. And in real life, this is what happened. He went over to him, and he's this young progressive activist guy with his girlfriend, and he goes over, and this young gentleman is having a meltdown of sorts. And he says, like, hey, what's going on? Can I help? And the guy just stabs him to death. And, well, of course, that's what was going to happen. I mean, very sad, obviously. So I realized this is the perfect way to start NUTCRANKR 2. And so, the spoiler alert, it's going to start with Spencer in a similar type situation with his very attractive and prized girlfriend, Marco Weisberg. And they're like, late at night, he encounters such a situation. And he's, rather than going over to help, he's terrified of this gentleman who, approaches them and, he seems unhinged. So Spencer, jumping into self-preservation mode, grabs Margot and pushes her into the guy and hightails it and tries to get away. And this is captured on video, and it's, it ends his career as a de-radicalization speaker and becomes the kind of stuff of online legend and what have you. So he tries to parlay this into a career in the dissident art scene.
Dude, there's so many ways you could take that.
So he returns to being trad. He returns back to his true nature of being a hero, of a traditional man of the West. He returns back. My effort posts were not for nothing. Yes.
Yeah, well, I mean, he never abandoned those ideas. Those ideas, he still believes everything. To the extent he had a coherent moral framework, he still believes everything he believed. He just, realized that it was not going to help him to kind of champion those ideas, but kind of in keeping with the timeline from NUTCRANKR to now, now there is kind of a window to champion these type of ideas. There is a Dime Square art scene. There is an emerging dissident media sphere. I dare say we are, all in it to some extent. So
you can get the project published by Lomez.
Essentially, that's his goal now. His goal is to now that he sees this emerging art scene, to get his project published by Lomez.
Yeah, I'm restraining myself. I'm on the edge of my seat about to pitch 5 ideas, Dan. I might send you a 20 bullet point list later of Spencer gets a job at Blaze TV, Spencer gets a job with Candace Owens, or there's so many ways you could take it because his power level is elevated now. He can go because he's a public figure.
Yeah.
So he can go anywhere.
I mean, he's also more savvy.
This is where it just turns into Spencer is Oron McIntyre, and that's just the character you're writing. The second and third volumes just turn into a biography of him.
Yeah, Oron McIntyre, but with autism.
He becomes this universe's Jordan Peterson. He signs up with a Daily Wire-esque.
Oh my god!
Deeply,
yes, he can dress up like that. Oh god.
Yeah, dude. He talks about chaos. You can spoof 12 Rules for Life. The project.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I did this, but you just turned this into a pitch session.
No, I love it.
But no, one sincere question I actually had about the ending was it based on any way the King of Comedy? Because I got a little bit of vibes from the ending.
I am only passingly familiar with the King of Comedy. I've seen it a long time ago. I don't really remember it, so no. I think
no.
No, I just got similar vibes.
So. I realize that we're all gonna read this in 2025 or whenever you feel that it's worth or that it's finished, and it's gonna be none of this. It's gonna be completely different.
I mean, there may be significant changes as things happen, but I mean, actually, interestingly enough, the original draft of NUTCRANKR and the final draft, I really didn't do much editing. I don't know. Hopefully that that's not apparent. There's a hastily.
It sprang fully formed.
How long was the writing process?
I mean, really not that long. I started maybe you've listened to interviews, but I started writing it actually before COVID. It's based on a short story that I started in 2019. But when COVID hit, my industry kind of ground to a halt. I had so much free time. So I said, okay, why don't I return to this story and make it into a novel? And so I started writing about 3 hours a day and, just going out for long walks after and working out in the evening. It was like living my best life, living the scholar artist life.
The grind set.
Exactly, that the Greeks and Romans have dreamed of or what have you. And in about 3.5 months, I wrote all of it.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask about your process in general, because in an interview with Prude, you said two things that I found really interesting, insightful to this process, not only of NUTCRANKR, but your style as a whole. You said, when I set out to write anything, I really don't have a plan. And when I write till I find the character's voice. So you're very much on an organic view of writing. And you
Absolutely.
can kind of feel that in NUTCRANKR. Because it's very much... It's not structureless, but the structure is very thin. It just does absolute minimum what it needs to. What I found while reading NUTCRANKR.
Yeah. So I mean, exactly. The way I think about writing and the way I think about writing a good novel, a good story. A professor told me a long time ago that that there can't be any such thing as like the good part of the story or the good part of the novel. It all has to be the good part. And that, that's something that stuck with me, and it's really hard because, there just will be periods where it's like, oh, this is, set up, this is dry, but one of the ways that I think you can ensure that the writing at any part of your novel, and this doesn't apply as much to short stories probably, but no, it does as well. Forget I said that. It applies to both. If you have a voice that works, that's interesting, that's funny, it does, or not funny, it doesn't have to be funny, but that is compelling in some sense, you can stop at any point in the narrative and it'll be good because the voice is good and you like hearing the voice.
Right. It'll carry you forward. It'll carry the reader forward. Do whatever you need to do.
Exactly. So I mean that's one.
I noticed that about your writing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why that A Confederacy of Dunces, which many people have drawn parallels between Dunces and NUTCRANKR, is so good. It's that no matter what point, and there a lot doesn't happen in Confederacy of Dunces. There's there's stuff that happens, but it's very disjointed. The pacing is very it kind of rises and falls, and it's kind of it's a bit disjointed. But regardless, you read any given page, it's gonna be good, just because the narrative voice is so strong and so funny that no matter what he's talking about, it's a good it's the good part.
Yeah, I could very much tell that, because when I just reread Doxing Dom this morning in preparation for this interview, and I noticed you have an innate style, it carries forward even beyond the voice of Spencer. It's still reactionary pervertitism or pervertness, right? It's still reactionary carnal, yeah, right. But you still have that very much that voice, and or even when you describe breasts, you are a Boobsman dream author as a Boobman myself. That story was fantastic in terms of, I described the breasts, right? Because in Doxing Dom, right? Because it goes from being a breast of a lioness when she's being offensive or trying to be like a predator to the protagonist of Joshua.
Yeah.
And then it goes to defensive balloons. You carry off the metaphor. You're not only trying to do LOL, boob as object. Boob as object is actually related to where it is at the novel. You can tell based on the tension. You can read the tension of this interaction between these two characters based on the way her tits are described. So I actually thought you actually did a brilliant job of both comedy and also conveying information and a mood and the atmosphere of the characters interacting.
Yeah. No, sex is just women are just so fun to describe, and I'm sure it's obvious that I'm very horny. And this is something that it's fun to kind of give life to it that, it's just this like, like I don't know, maybe there are probably men who are less horny or, or have that passion for other things. I don't know. But to be able to kind of imbue my writing with the passion I have for the female form, that sounds kind of gay, but you know what I mean. For
That's the opposite of gay.
Yeah. It it just kind of writes itself. It's like, like for instance, the like, you guys are all on Twitter. I'm sure you have some GCs that you're in or what have you, and like, among the GCs, like some people be like, oh, why don't you contribute? Why don't you write in or blah blah blah, and the GC that I'm like always like, I'm on all day, I'm contributing. It's the horny gooning GC. It's the GC,
the Goon Squad.
Like, where we all like send pictures of big tit girls. So
so you're saying delicious tacos? You don't have to confirm or deny.
He may or may not be in this GC, but that's the vibe. Yes.
So
it's the Titmudic order. That's the one he's about.
Exactly.
So this is actually probably a good topic to transition into. You have a Substack, and your most recent Substack is about is about horniness, right? So
that's right. Traditionally horny.
Traditionally horny. That's right. So in that you're talking about a few things, but not least of which is that sexual deviance in a healthy society is underground, but not non-existent. Importantly, not absent, right?
Correct. Yeah, because my thinking there is just that, like, well, it's a part of human development and human psychology is everyone's gonna have their like perversions. That's just like, people are not going to not be perverted, and then they're not going to, like, you can try to keep men from buggering each other. They're still gonna do it. The guys who want to do that, they're gonna do it. They're gonna find a way to do it. So
yeah,
like that's just part of having a society. There will be a place where men do that. And also in all other sorts of things. Not just that, just other stuff that, like I mentioned, Martha Stewart on the cover of Sports Illustrated. Like there's obviously men who are turned on by women in their 70s or whatever. Not my thing, but there are men who are into that, and that's just like, it's gonna happen, and there should be not that there should be a space for it necessarily, but there will be a space for it. But the issue is more that the popular culture should not try to normalize and make those sorts of perversions a normative good, because they're not.
Right.
Because they will not lead to, like, as I said in the article, like the healthy family formation, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, and indeed, there's just like a better, if that is what you're into, like, does the idea of it being on like a billboard, does that like make it better for the horny dude who likes that stuff? I don't know. I wouldn't imagine so. It it must be, I don't know, kind of weird to see like everyone pretending to think that the weird thing that you like is normal.
I kind of feel like the let's see, you had a quote in here. The kinksters of today are unattractive because people are acting as if all, let's say we're at the point of liberal decay where we can't acknowledge that beauty is a thing, and so everyone is equally attractive. And so you have, you publish this the same week that those those courthouse photos of the near deformed Carolyn Ellison, part of SBF's criminal polycule. Yeah, the billion dollar money laundering goblin sex cult. So we're circulating, and yeah, it's like, what is worse than Citibank sponsoring an orgy? It's like that's literally FTX, right? That's
exactly.
That's exactly.
It's kind of like the Marvel effect. It's like if you were into Marvel and D&D and all sorts of nerdy shit like 20 years ago, and then watching it be stolen from you. I was into some of that stuff, and I have a slight feeling that I can only imagine how a poor sex pervert must feel watching, like, your perversions be commercialized and commodified into these weird lifestyle brands, and then there's like a whole separate economy formed. I have my own theories and conspiracies on that, but I did enjoy that essay, and I broadly agree. I think it's one of those things on the dissident side where there's the more purist and there's the more horn dog side, and I think there needs to be a synthesis of, like, to your point, Dan, this stuff just obviously it existed, in Rome. It existed in medieval times in a way. You have to develop a tolerance and, like, what's a healthy way for these to be quarantined, basically.
I mean, I do feel like the Crest white strips having an ass-eating ad is probably not something that could have been achieved even at the height of Rome.
Really?
I'm just saying.
Hey, it's a good way to sell teeth brushes.
Yeah. Hey, we're doing SatiriCon next.
Yes.
So
it's going to get worse.
Maybe we'll find
get
out.
worse.
I wanted to ask, because your piece on reactionary pervertedness, it was actually very interesting, because your fiction stands in a very much a contrast against what you would consider like a trad, or let's just say healthy or vitalistic pervertedness. Where like the Rome, the season of like Venus, the guys would go out wild, run the streets of Rome, slapping girls' asses, coming on statues at night. It was considered like a nerdy thing to do, to come on a statue, right? It was a healthy.
Oh, you took that personally, Gabe? Was that like a little sensitive topic for you?
I appreciate that. I had a literally me moment when I was reading like Ovid's Art of Poetry. Like, Ovid was literally me, like when I was like in 1st century BC. That book is like written by me with higher IQ points. But anyway, where was I? Oh yeah, so I've noticed this in your fiction. It's reactionary in the negative sense, because all the men are subservient to women to a certain degree. Even the good Grunhauser, even the holy, serene Spencer is completely reactionary to the women around him. His actions predicate on whether women will fuck him or will not fuck him. And by the way, it's an amoral thing. It is not moral to not fuck Spencer, right? You've heard my argument that Nora did something very wrong. Yeah. In the Tudor house, because the Tudor house was the hinge point for my reading of your book. Yeah.
Oh, we got to get into that. Actually, that was my big question, Dan. While we have you on to confirm or deny, who was in the wrong here with the Nora ass grabbing? What was the intended bad boy in that scenario?
So, I mean, Gabe was quite right in that, and I'm,
many such cases.
I'm very happy that he picked up on this, because I don't think anyone actually has, besides Gabe, until now. But yeah, I intended that the Tudor House chapters, the beginning, that would be the loss of Spencer's innocence to the extent he had it, and that he had a more elevated view of women and of life, and he was a happier kind of, that seems strange. He still seems like a very, disaffected young gentleman, but regardless, he that was meant to be a loss of innocence chapter. And so when he realized, because he thinks like at the beginning of, the book, at the beginning of his college career, before that party, he thinks he's on top of the world. He thinks he's like the smartest, best looking guy there. He thinks everyone wants him. And he does, to a certain extent, continue to believe that later, or, fool himself into that. But yeah, Nora's rejection of him and his subsequent, ejection from the house at the hands of Alex, who did, grab her
Definitely
ass,
grabbed her
of
ass,
course.
yeah.
That, yeah. And she, did, if not encourage it, she didn't necessarily not enjoy it. And I forget which one of you brought it up, but like, yeah, it is, it's kind of borderline like inappropriate for the professor to have like her 18-year-old students over drinking and playing beer pong. So like, yeah, she, is somewhat in the wrong in that sense. She, but like, no, I mean, I don't think she's in the wrong to turn down Spencer. She doesn't want Spencer. She shouldn't have to be with Spencer. That's not, But I mean, like, so. But here's the thing, like, Spencer's right to be enraged, of course, like to be turned down by a woman that you are infatuated with. That's an enraging proposition. So did he handle it well? Of course not. But yeah, I mean, like, Spencer is someone who is in many senses not well adapted. So his response to being rejected by Nora, well, like, number one, he was not socially intelligent enough to realize that the reality of the situation was so far off from his view of it. And so when that reality came and kind of, bit him on the ass, he responded very negatively. But I mean, like, how should a man respond to heartbreak? I mean, like, not like Spencer, but regardless, like, it is something that, like, would have a negative emotional impact on anyone.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You'd have a poor reaction, and I have been there in a party setting.
Yeah, what a beta male.
I've been there, and hey, man, you either die an alpha or you live past the age of 18.
Exactly. Yes, that's a good quote. Yeah.
Well, I mean, because also you describe the hallway where this happens. Like, when you really think about it, his life is a miscarriage from then forth. That fundamentally breaks his entire view. Because
I do like that. Yeah.
I guarantee you, yeah, because you describe it as a womb. I assume that like prose was intentional, right? Because like I reread that as soon as I heard, no, it wasn't intentional.
Well, like, I mean, the thing is, like, as I said, I get into the mind of the character, and that just was what felt appropriate in the description. But you may well be right that it was a sort of like still birth of his initial. I like that reading of it, and I co-sign on it. He that was his first love, and as he said in the prologue, Nora was the woman who taught him all he had to know about all women. And that kind of like colored his worldview going forward. I mean, would there have been another Nora? Of course, yeah. But I mean, regardless, that was a moment of kind of formative heartbreak for him.
Yeah, that section was beautifully structured. It was pure unconscious, like, Jungian synchronicity to have that line in there, especially when it's revealed in the end. Because, like, we talked about this, all three of us, where Spencer is not crazy, that he hallucinates things. You very structurally, I know you're not a structural guy, but you made it very clear what was delusional is exclusively his interpretation of events, not the events themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, everything that he, believes, everything that he describes has actually happened. It just didn't necessarily happen in the way that he described it.
Right. And what we ever see out of you? Like, because even Spencer, who kind of, out of all the male characters, Enrique is purely a sex fiend. At least with Spencer, even in his crippled Machiavellian, I just want to get money and be successful, even at the end, it's actually something separate from women. He only gets a woman when he focuses not on women. which is being a de-radicalization expert, which is a beautiful little irony, right? So will we ever see out of you an actual text that portrays your philosophy of reactionary pervertedness, a healthy version? Because all these texts involve men being being longhoused, basically, to crippled, woke-pussied women.
That's interesting. So in writing about sex and sexuality from like a male perspective today, like you have to deal with, of course, hypergamy and the kind of the
Me Too culture,
the malformed sexual and dating marketplace, and so it's really difficult to do that in a way that doesn't result in a sort of portrayal of someone who is either like a psychopathic success story, or someone who is like craven and like beaten down. And I mean, could I portray a healthy relationship? Yeah, I mean, if I'm in a healthy relationship, I'm sure I could if I wanted to. It's just kind of like, I don't know. It's not fun writing about well-adapted people. So
it's quite boring, actually.
Yeah, I mean, like, could I? I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Well, and you wouldn't be writing about the present moment in the same way, because if the idea is you're trying to capture to some extent what you're experiencing, what we're all experiencing, if you write about Amish people or a more traditional happy arrangement, then you're writing a different genre at that point.
Exactly.
So you're kind of you're trapped a little bit, or you're not trapped. It makes sense to lean more towards the hypergamy angle, the quote unquote incel type rhetoric.
Nutcell rhetoric.
Incel, the nutcell rhetoric.
Yeah. No, I'm sure I could. I'm like, now that I think about it, like if I wanted to write a story about, like a healthy, well-adapted guy and his like dealing with the modern world and all of the kind of trials and travails and impositions that it places upon normal dating and sexual dynamics and family dynamics. Yeah, I'm sure I could write something that would be more triumphant, more, kind of like more of a how-to guide or something like that, or just more of a, I don't know, less of a pathetic character than Spencer, more of, someone who is, successful and conquering and or just even, happy and healthy. But I don't know. I haven't.
That sounds way less interesting.
Yeah, I haven't found a voice that interests me that says that.
I must say that you just kind of broke my heart by describing Grunhauer as pathetic. Grunhauer boys are not having a good time right now.
Well, I mean, like, I will say, like, pathetic, yes, in some respects, but, like, yeah, I mean, like, obviously, I have a soft spot for Spencer. Like, he's, number one, I don't think he's wrong about that much. He, he's kind of, like, too autistic to realize that what he's saying will not go over well. And so like I kind of, I do have a soft spot for him, and there is, as you've noted in your episode, and in your episode on incel, which I also enjoyed a lot, that Spencer has this kind of admirable ability to spin, defeat into victory. To kind of cast any humiliation in a victorious light, and that I do absolutely co-sign on. And
it's oddly adaptive.
Yeah, he's very, and I mean, I think like when you in describing incel and contrasting Spencer from Anon, that like Spencer is happy at all times, and I don't know that, and Anon is depressed, obviously. I don't know that Spencer is necessarily happy at all times, but he is kind of like possessed of this adaptive ability to, you know, kind of immediately bounce back from any sort of humiliation or failure with, as one of you characterized, he's like pure cope and seethe. And like, yes, that's true, but I think there's a lot of power in the ability to cope. And so like, yes, he's seething, but he like through his ability to reframe events, he is like coping very well in some respects through all of these humiliations.
Well, and he did immediately rationalize away, having been gay raped as no,
Yes.
that was based actually.
Very Homeric.
like Achilles of old.
What's the difference between he's like a spiritual being, Anon is a materialist to such a T. He when the odds are against him, he cannot calculate his way out.
Yeah.
That's kind of like part of that book cycle. I had a two-part question kind of going off that, just in terms of how much of NUTCRANKR is autobiographical. The first part, Dan, is have you ever, and maybe this has happened to me, have you ever autistically attempted to document your belief system, even if it was like one sentence? Have you ever made a Word document, a Mac whatever document? And part two, the crystal date scene, how much of that is based on real experience dating in New York?
Good questions. So, I don't think I've actually tried to set forth my No, that's not true. I mean, I have in the guise of articles that I haven't published that I've kind of tried to set forth what I believe is the ideal political state or whatever. I've made attempts at that for sure. So yeah, I mean, I do have that under my belt, and the project did not come from nowhere. The project is something that I've often kind of at times thought of NUTCRANKR as the project. It's this thing that you're writing that no one knows about, that at that time really no one knew about. It was before I even had an internet presence. So it is something that, yeah, I mean, I can identify for sure with being a guy with a project. And when it comes to the fear of a woman that you're intimate with discovering your beliefs and your writing or what have you, yeah, I mean not to the extent that Spencer had it, where he was in a relationship with a woman and was had these long chapters about how he was going to subvert the piglet. I didn't have that, but I mean being a man dating.
You saved that for the DMs, right?
Exactly. Being a man who was dating in New York City, of course, I have a long-term girlfriend now. I'm not dating any longer, but I of course dated woke women and liberal women, and at times there were definitely moments where I knew some girl was going to come over, and so I took the bell curve and I turned the spine around so she can see what it was. I hid other books under the bed. I still do that when mixed company comes over, by the way. I can't.
Probably not a bad move.
The bell curve, okay. Some of the other ones, can't have too many questions about that. So, yeah, I mean.
Why do you have 50 copies of The Pussy, Dan? What is this?
Well, more like 50 copies of NUTCRANKR. Let me what the fuck is this NUTCRANKR thing? Who's this Dan Baltic guy?
I have a funny story, if you'll indulge me. My father-in-law was visiting this week, and I had a copy of Roberto Bolaño's Nazi Literature in the Americas sitting on the sitting on the dresser in the guest bedroom that I did not move because I moved all of the actual all of the actually potentially objectionable material, but I forgot that one that just appeared to be maybe a little off. So
I mean, I feel like that's fine though, because like Bolaño, he's a literary fiction author. He's like he was a certified, I assume lib of some sort. Like there's no like mainstream literary fiction authors who weren't, somehow on the left. So at least these, in the past 50 years.
Right.
So
right.
I mean, there's some deviations there. Of course, that's a sweeping statement. But like I feel like you won't get in too much trouble for that.
Well, there were questions were asked. That's all I'm saying.
Fair enough. Yeah.
I thought you were going to bring up your wife's reaction to the cover.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was
well. I mean,
I listened to that part of your episode, and I will tell you that this cover has sold a lot of novels just based on the cover alone. It's just kind of like you want, and that's what I told Terror House. I'm like, you gotta, put hot kind of slutty girl on the cover. That's what's gonna move copies, because this is not Oprah's book club. This is not, this is like, we're selling novels on the internet. So, yeah. So, I mean,
you gotta lean into the sleaze.
Exactly. And I mean, like, so also, like, the cover of so it's by the same artist as the cover of the Pussy. It's by Matt Lawrence, who's the in-house artist at Terror House. And you were good eyes, good to note that, like, I did tell him to make it look like Billie Eilish in fetish gear with a pussy hat. So yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, I get why, like, like when women see this, like even my girlfriend, like I don't think she loves that I have so many nutcrackers around the apartment, but it's just like it is. Regardless, like women do own nutcrackers. There are women who it's like. It's it does look kind of
at least two.
The cover. At least two.
At least two.
My girlfriend and my mom. No, my mom. No, they probably do own a copy. Actually, my parents they do know about my writing career, such as it is.
They're very proud of your achievements of your cranking.
Yeah.
They should be.
They should be.
No joke getting a book out, man.
It is also a very good novel. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah.
John Kennedy Toole's mom was so proud of his book that she famously bullied people into getting it published, and you didn't even need to kill yourself. So
yeah.
Yet wait till NUTCRANKR 2. You might have to.
Yeah.
You didn't need to rely on the power of the Longhouse. You did it Longhouse free.
Yeah.
True.
I know. Where Toole took the coward's way out. I persevered.
True.
I got this baby published. I'm the Nutman. And I mean, I do want to go back to the not so much the parents thing, but the idea of split personalities and kind of like it is in some ways I do find it unfortunate that like I wouldn't trade my current audience and my current like alternative platform for a mainstream one, frankly, because if I were like writing for Simon and Schuster, like they would, heavily edit whatever I wrote. At this point, that's a non-starter. Of course, Simon and Schuster would not sign me. They're not going to sign, the co-host of New Right and the Nutman. But, even if there were a universe where that could happen, I just want to have creative control. But more than that, I want to have the audience like you guys. I want to have the people who read my work for the right reasons, not like a lib who's reading it who thinks like this was a good satire of the dissident right. That's not what I want.
Right.
So but all that being said, I mean, I do kind of like miss the I would like, because like my parents don't understand really that like okay, a few thousand people have bought copies of NUTCRANKR. That's as good or better than most literary fiction authors. This actually, like, you know, is getting out there. People are talking about it. I mean, like, that doesn't, you know, that doesn't rate to more normie people. They're like, well, have you been reviewed in the Times? Have you, you know, who are you published by? So, yeah, I mean, like, I do kind of, it's a shame in some ways that I think mainstream credibility is a ways away for people like me. But that being said, in some respects, it makes it cleaner. It makes it easier. I'm like not writing for money. I mean, like I suppose NUTCRANKR has made some money. I'll have to ask Matt Forney about that someday. But just kidding. I have received royalties and such. But I mean, the point is that I am not making the bulk of my income in any sense from NUTCRANKR, and it's better that way. It's better to I'm not making significant money from New Right or any of my online pursuits, any of my writing, and for that reason, I feel absolutely not beholden to anyone. I want to serve my audience. I want to serve my readership, give them stuff that they like, but I don't want to pander, and I don't have to. So it's a better position to be in ultimately, but I do kind of wish that, the people who care about more mainstream status symbols or credibility would, be able to view NUTCRANKR as the accomplishment that I view it as.
Well, everyone, as artists, as creatives in general, we all want that recognition. Like, the reason why I have self-expression is to be expressed and to people recognize that expression. It's in the word.
Exactly.
So I can definitely see why that, like, there's always that little bit of not envy, but just kind of like, fuck, I wish you would notice me, or at least recognize. Even being hated by the New York Times is better than being ignored by the Times.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're kind of at this strange cultural moment where the most interesting and the best work is being produced outside of the actual accepted, like, mainstream culture. And maybe this is hubris, I don't know, but I feel like in 20, 30 years, people are going to look back on the art that came out of the 2020s, and they're going to say, like, well, the stuff that people were talking about in Discords and on Twitter, that was actually the stuff of real art, and that the Oprah's book club stuff, the all the crawdads I could not see, whatever, that stuff is like not that won't really be remembered, I don't think.
There was a great John Michael Greer article about fiction writing where he talks about feudal Japan, and the writers that are well known today, almost all people that were in their era were unknown, and much more female, actually. Let's go girls, than male, because they had a very strict system of, like, form of the writing and ways things were written that was the official and, like, what was sold in bookstores. But then there was this thriving underground scene of largely female poets, but other people that thrived. And he made some comparisons to our modern scene, as much as he's not really in this exact part of the subculture, but I view him as kind of somewhat related.
Yeah,
Mishima talked about that as well.
Oh, really? Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I feel like we're at that stage where, I think in a few years, I think this scene will be larger and keep growing. But if nothing else, you can really be honest here, even if you don't totally agree with, because there's a lot of little mini subcultures within it. But, like NUTCRANKR, I'm sure a tradcath could get pissed at something in it, but I don't see any of that. People come in with the right attitude. Yeah, it's really a space to try expressing yourself.
Yeah. I think the reception that NUTCRANKR has received among the more trad parts of our side of Twitter has been pretty good, actually. Like, I've had people reach out to me who, say, like, I can't review this. My followers would not like that, but I loved it. and and it's, I think what shines through is that I clearly have affection for Spencer, and that, I think the people who dislike NUTCRANKR on the right are more the people who kind of are just, more insecure, kind of like afraid that they are Spencer, afraid that, that Spencer, it hits too close to home for some people, and I think that is something that, upsets them, maybe. But I think most
certain wife guys felt that way.
If they're afraid of it, they're probably right.
Ooh.
And I think in general, like the trads, they understand that, Spencer is, not he's not a villain. He's not and they understand that I'm, kind of that I'm on side, I suppose, in that respect.
Well, you have that plausible deniability with NUTCRANKR, because it basically splits to two different interpretations. My co-host thinks the humor is from, oh my god, he's so absurd, this is the mind of the gooner, right? So the trad wing interpretation, and you have like the Babovitalist interpretation of the text. So you kind of get to play both sides at the same time. You got two, you benefit from both interpretations.
No, that's
the part of the
true.
Comedy.
I've had, as I said before, I've had libs read it, and they interpret it even from that perspective, and they're like, "Oh, I thought you were just like making fun of how stupid right wing people are," and I'm like, "Well, not exactly."
Dude, I was shocked, Dan, when I think it was what interview was it? Was it Prude? You mentioned that you had shopped it around with a bunch of libtard publishing companies. I was like, this man is the most optimistic Spencerian character I've ever met.
Sunshine.
Spencer did emerge from my brain, so I perhaps have some of that optimism. And indeed, I actually, frankly, I was surprised. I thought okay, it's a little spicy maybe, but I thought that the writing shines through. This is a topic that is incels and whatever. This was 2019. Not 20. It was middle of 2020. So it was post COVID. But yeah, that's when I was shopping it around, and just crickets. And I guess I get it. If you're an agent, you don't want to take on something that is going to, potentially take up your time and not make money, or but worse still, get you canceled and you lose your job.
Yeah.
So I guess I get it, but I was nevertheless surprised.
Well, it's also lacking many of the things that a literary agent might want, like an enemies to lovers plot or something that's reminiscent of such great anime as Demon Slayer or My Hero Academia, which is how you get them. How you get them nowadays. You gotta pitch that.
Let's be honest.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now,
Dan, what's your trope checklist look like? How many tropes are you hitting every novel?
I just
we probably could actually
I
tag this.
That's an interesting question. I do kind of not necessarily tropes, but there are kind of elements that when I was, thinking about NUTCRANKR 2 and still thinking about it as I'm writing it, I'm like, well, what are kind of cool news hooks that I could put into it? And so him running into Dasha at a party, that'd be cool. That's not a trope, obviously, and I know the post you're referencing.
Oh no. Yeah. I'm riffing on that. And was it Save the Cat and just the general, intro to writing thing I feel people are hit with, like you have to write like this, or else you're not doing it right. Yeah, which just pisses me off.
The neo-lib writing structure.
I mean, the thing about the like plot and structure, that to me is that's if you're writing a screenplay, in general you want to have more of a plot or structure, just because it does need to be shot, and it's kind of like if it's a more of an investment in terms of money and capital. You want a structure. I mean, true, there are many films that lack a traditional dramatic structure, and but it depends on the genre. If you're writing airport thrillers, you do want to have a certain plot structure, but like all of this kind of like structural advice is not, in my opinion, really applicable to, and this is maybe sounds like a lib cop out, but it's not applicable to literary fiction. It you kind of if you're trying to create something that has literary value, like honestly, I hate to put it in this way exactly, but like you're kind of either you can teach yourself to write formulaically. You can teach yourself to write like an airport thriller type novel. You can't really teach yourself to write a good novel, to write like good literature, and like you kind of either have it or you don't. And the best way to find out is to sit down and write. And if you can sit down,
same goes for comedy.
Yeah, for sure.
True.
And like the best way to do it is just you sit down and you write, or if comedy, you still like you write really, and if you produce something that like it's a voice or whatever that you like, you don't have to worry about structure, because structure will take care of itself. You'll just start writing and it'll go the places you want it to go. And this is like what people don't get about writing. You have too many. Here's my like big criticism of, not to say that like most of us in this sphere are like by now kind of like, even if we came from MFA programs or whatever, are pretty divorced from that world. But this is what I have to say about that world, that if you're like concerned about like, how do I like learn to write good literature, you're probably not like gonna write good literature. You need to you need to be able to kind of sit down and just like do it. And it's not about a formula. It's not about a structure, like learning how to, follow a diagram. It's about like actually just writing, and kind of. It is like Gabe says. It's like comedy. Like you get up, you do stand up. Yes, to some extent, it is formulaic, of course. And so is even literary fiction. Like any story is going to have like rely upon certain formulas, certain tropes. But if you're like kind of like planning the joke out, and like this is like when I kind of hold my breath, this is when I pause, this is when I hit them with the punchline. That's just not going to really. It might work, it might be serviceable, but it's not going to be like great comedy. And like great comedy can't be taught, really. Like no one, I mean, like maybe we have varying opinions on like, I don't know, like I think Nick Mullen, regardless of politics, he is really funny, and like that can't really be taught. Like that kind of like way of talking and thinking about things, it's just kind of like you got it or you don't.
Yeah, it's not expressed through logos, right? It's like with athletes, like David Foster Wallace had his great essay about Tracy Austin. It's like if you ask like an all-star athlete, like, what's your secret? What do you do? And the classic line is, well, I just take it one ball at a time. And it enrages the theory cells, right? But it's actually true. The professionals don't think about it that much. That it doesn't work that way when you're good at something. You just do it.
Yeah, and like even like Michael Jordan, like famously, he is like the hardest working guy in basketball. But okay, well, he was also really good at it. Like, you
Yeah.
worked really. What the people leave out, they hear like, oh, Michael Jordan, he worked really hard, and he is the best basketball player of all time. Well, okay, but I mean, like, that's kind of like someone who was already really good at something worked really hard at it. So that's kind of like if you're already a great writer, you wrote every day all the time. Okay, yeah, you
It's a natural outgrowth of energy.
Yeah, exactly.
I knew a guy who was a coach to like CEOs and people like that. And one time he told me, he's like, I can basically tell within 10, 15 minutes of meeting someone, like what caliber of leader they are. And I'm like, what do you do if you don't sense it? He's like, well, they're fucked. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, he's like, there really is a lot of skills. And even those really soft skills, like comedy or leadership, is like, people just have innate abilities for it. And you have to work around that to an extent.
Absolutely.
So yeah, nice exclusionary attitude towards art, Dan. Thanks for building that wall.
Sorry, guys.
How elitist and cis hetero of you.
Elite theory.
I've become Bappian in my old age.
But no, my question with regards to like theory cell and writing, it's twofold. It's in NUTCRANKR, the politics and like the humor. Because Wallace, in Considered a Lobster, he has this great essay talking about Kafka's humor. And in your work, I would say it would be more about your tragedy, right? Because when I read the book, and if I remember, I made an effort post comparing it to Nobukov's lectures of Don Quixote. I realized when I was reading it, now to be clear, this is not an insult. When I was reading it, I was like, this is supposed to be funny. This is funny. But is this morally correct to be funny? What I mean by that is like, while reading this, like the whole joke, the whole reason why Spencer is funny to people like Dave or Capitalismo is because they had lives as normies, right? They have the standards of culture to think that a guy posting on 3chain about like spousal disputation system is amoral or wrong or absurd. The whole point of something being absurd is that's not normal or outside your domain of experiences. Well, for me, I've been inside this schizo shit since I was like 14, right? So what's funny to them about Spencer, I'm like, I was posting this since I was 15, right? So for me, it was more Kafka-esque, dare I say, to use a cliche term, right, of your book.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I genuinely had more of a positive view on Grunhauer, right? So what I wanted to ask you about how this intersects is, because let's say I use this example in my effort post. If you gave a Reagan voter, or like Orrin McIntyre's granddad back in the 70s and 80s, conservative Reagan, if you gave him Bronze Age mindset, he'd be like, what the fuck is this? You know what I mean? This is not base. This is not trad. So what I ask you about is, how would you think NUTCRANKR would be received in based world? Like in 2055, we're in an absolute monarchy, mold bug world. So how would you think the humor and the politics go out together?
I would think it would be seen as kind of a like in based world in the kingdom of mold buggy and ends. It would presumably the more right wing and what have you philosophies would have prevailed, and I think people would have a generally supportive and favorable view of Spencer and his I think Spencer would be seen as kind of and this is the way I intend him to be seen anyways, as a sort of comic exaggeration of the plight of young men in the 21st century, and
the sensitive young men.
Exactly. And that people would kind of look back on it as like, yes, to an extent, a send up of Spencer, and a send up of the kind of the absurdity of the very online right wing culture. But I mean, that being said, it's kind of it's a loving self-deprecation of sorts. And I think that is the way that generally the not yet world historical triumphant based world, but the right wing Twitter sphere in general views it. I think, which is as a sort of affectionate homage to our thing, as it were.
Right. Well, actually, you have a story about such a based world coming up, if I recall correctly. It's your only, I believe, serious piece or non-comical piece, as I understand.
Oh yes, yeah. In of course, in the flash fiction anthology. Yeah, no, I have a piece in that, and that's kind of I'm very excited to have it out there. Proud of everyone's work in that anthology, and that was my kind of trying on to an extent another hat. It's as I've written and posted on Twitter. It's a decidedly non-horny story. It's a kind of look at triumphant or not triumph, but like a serious look at heroism and male camaraderie and I think I don't know to what extent I'm allowed to say anything. Maybe I should err on the side of not. But it just suffice to say, it takes place in the future, in the after based world has become triumphant, and regardless, even in based world, there are perils and challenge trials that valiant men must go through. And the protagonist of this short story, he overcomes a certain kind of heroic challenge.
And do you have any struggles writing non-comedy, or do you just have that innate kind of like energy that if it doesn't go spend one direction comedy, because it's still about this typical pause and release of attention. Comedy, there's a reason why the comedy mask is right next to the drama mask. You could switch between the two very easily by just redirecting the energy. Do you have any problems doing that, or no?
I mean, I would say comedy comes more naturally to me. Yeah, for sure. But that being said, I can, pretty easily write in more kind of straightforward, less dramatic prose, more, it doesn't always feel as natural. And I mean, I think if, like real, like Dan Baltic heads, you want that nut. You want that nutcranker, and that's like my voice, my style, and I think that even shines through in my as you read in traditionally horny in my essayistic writing. That being said, I can, not to pat myself on the back too much, but I am a proficient writer. I can write in different styles and voices. And and this is something that I didn't for this addition to the flash fiction anthology, the After We've Won anthology to be published by Passage Press. I did not set out to necessarily this is going to be not horny, this is going to be serious, this is going to be. I mean, I knew that this is going to be a different type of story. But it all came naturally. It all kind of flowed. It's just getting into a different voice.
You could have very easily gone horny with it.
I mean,
after the war, bitches will be assigned. It's literally just written by Spencer Grunauer.
If you got to pay the bills, that might be the way to do it, Dan. Just write some gore tier, harem.
Yeah, some John Norman
slash fiction.
It might be.
Yeah.
No, Mad Max Spencer.
It's Dan. So how did After the War come together? Actually, because I don't believe that I didn't see Passage Prize release a call for that. So how did that come together? When was that? When was that stuff written? And Yeah. So tell me about the process there.
100% of the credit there in terms of, well, I'm not going to say 100% because, certainly he worked in collaboration with Passage. Passage is the one who published it and, got it into the shape it's now in. But the person who organized everyone and got everyone to write these stories is Woland. He's on Twitter, not necessarily a big account, but he did run the GC where he invited all of us to submit our flash fiction, and he got the anthology together. He's the one who reached out to Lomez and made it happen. So yeah, look up Woland. He's the mastermind behind After the War, and he blurbed NUTCRANKR. He's a really great guy, and cool. Yeah, what I will say about kind of being part of that process is it's really inspiring to see all of these people who have the writing is not their job by any sense. They are they have other jobs, they have other they have maybe families, what have you, but they feel like such a kind of passion for writing that they write in the same way I suppose many of us do, in the mornings or the evenings, and are probably really excited to see their work coming out there, and excited to actually and I'm guilty of this too. You fall into a schedule in your career, you're working, you're whatever, and writing falls by the wayside, and it's it's something that you just kind of, it's a luxury, you don't have time for it, and it's great to see people writing who otherwise maybe wouldn't have felt the desire and motivation to in their free time devote it to that type of stuff.
Yeah, and for a good cause in this case too, of course.
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Of course.
Proceeds go to the defense of Douglas Mackey, aka Ricky Vaughn, who posted a meme that has been decided by the U.S. government to be the spiciest ever delivered.
I don't think it was even his originally. It was such a frame up. Yeah.
It was not. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I mean that should give everyone pause. It's just, I still can't believe that has I am a lawyer, and it's just so it's such like a weaponized use of the justice system that obviously it should come as like no surprise to any of us that the powers that be, if they want to turn up the heat on you, they have every ability to do so, and have every you are not safe in any sense, really. That being said, it's just kind of like, I feel like it's kind of a luck of the draw type of thing. In general, I have Kevin Dolan of Exit Group. He put it this way in a podcast that in order for the government to really come after you, it's a question of whether the juice is worth the squeeze. And so, like, if they're going to, if let's say you work for, the government, and they want to, they don't like what you're doing, they could fire you. They could, of course, they'll do that. But if you are just like a private citizen making your own money, independently, don't work for a corporation or whatever, it becomes much more difficult for the government to, or for the media or the regime, whatever you want to call it, to hurt you. And then it becomes much more costly for them as well, because if they want to prosecute you for some nonsense, well, obviously they've proven that they can do that. But I mean, like, it costs a lot of money, and it also costs them credibility, because, you know, everyone who hears this, they're like, wait, they put this guy in jail for a meme? That's insane. That's, you know, they can only do that so many times, right? And if they keep doing stuff like that, eventually it's like, oh, well, this is just really very illegitimate.
Yeah, I mean, I do have some very, very lefty friends who, when they learned about that, they were like, oh, well, that's obviously bullshit, right? So
Yeah,
even people who are not politically aligned, who are reasonable humans, can see the injustice in at least part of this. So
exactly.
Well, yeah, well, there's parts of NUTCRANKR that are kind of a commentary on this. Like, even the ending of NUTCRANKR. I mean, yeah, like, basically, if Ricky Vaughn, you know, if the Biden camp made him post, like, Dark Brandon memes as a way of, like, earning his life back, you know, that's kind of what happens to poor Spencer.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, I mean, that's, like, what, you know, essentially, yeah, that's where we find Spencer at the end. And that's kind of, like, what I'm navigating with in NUTCRANKR 2, where he's, like, at the point where he has become a, you know, in some sense a regime toady, while still holding his own beliefs, his, you know, more based beliefs, and, you know, kind of like trying to square that. And, you know, and indeed, like, he does so, you know, in the Spencerian or Grunhauerian fashion. He does that well, because he knows how to do that. He knows how to, you know, spin it. But regardless, yeah, that is absolutely where Spencer finds himself.
Yeah, he's a natural Machiavellian. And, like, actually, another good question just on the text. What are some things you've learned between working on NUTCRANKR, completing NUTCRANKR, both narratively but also as a business or just a function of writing a sequel? What are some things you learned between NUTCRANKR 1 and NUTCRANKR 2?
So, what I've learned, I mean, like, I'd like to say I've learned more creatively or artistically. I don't think my process has changed very much. I mean, in terms of the art of it, yeah, I mean, I don't know that I've grown as an artist, but what I have learned is the aspects of, like, book promotion. I guess I sensed at the time when I chose NUTCRANKR as the title that it would lend itself to promotion, but I've kind of learned. Well, how to, you know, promote a novel, and how to, you know, in this, you know, day and age where you have the kind of dissident author who, you know, is not supported by a publicity department, you know, what have you, you have not only, if you want to sell copies, it's incumbent upon you. But, like, in addition to that, you do have tremendous power to promote your own book through, like, you know, posting, through kind of, you know, making good memes. And, yeah, I mean, like, then, like, you know, that too, posting is a talent. Like, that's, you know, that is kind of like to an extent you have it or you don't. It probably can be more learned than, like, writing novels, I feel. But that being said, like, yeah, you know, there is a certain innate ability in even in posting, but it shouldn't, you know, that shouldn't scare anyone off. Anyone who is an independent author, a dissident author, who, you know, does not have a publisher, does not have a publicity department, you should absolutely be your own greatest advocate. And that's what I've learned. I've, you know, like, I had a post where Jordan Peterson was, you know, I did a picture of Peterson and he was praising NUTCRANKR in his, like, Kermit voice. And, like, that.
I saw that post. That was gold.
Thanks, yeah.
That was Jemmy. That was very much Jim.
Yeah, that, and that was one of my most popular Nutshell posts. and it's just like it's fun to do. It's fun to like, and another thing I've learned about, you know, the book selling business, shall we say, um, and I think this is especially true as we go on in time in the development of our kind of, I mean, certainly not to be one of these like AI pessimists or whatever, but I think one of the most important abilities of an author, and one of the greatest values that he brings to his work, is his persona and personality. So like you want you want to have a presence as a like you want people to know who Dan Baltic is, so they buy his novel, and that's going to become especially more and more important as computers learn how to write novels. So yeah, I mean, I think there will always, and I'm ultimately an AI optimist because I think that ultimately the reason why we read things is because we want to, know what that person thinks. We don't want to know what some machine thinks. We don't really care. But like the reason why people read Nutcranker is because there's a lunatic named Dan Baltic screaming about nut on Twitter and shilling it, and people think like, what's going on here? They want to find out, and
they want in on that nut.
So, exactly, they want to get that nut, and and it creates an ecosystem where like I'm on this this stream right now. I'm gonna post about it and promote it. Like in 2 weeks, I'm going to be reading from Nutcranker at an event in New York City.
Awesome.
Sponsored by Adam Lear.
Peter Thiel.
Not that I know of, but Adam Lear of Safety Propaganda, and he's organizing it, and a lot of people will be reading. I'm going to be one of them, and creating a sort of cult of the author, a sort of presence that is going to be like really key, I think, in the future to selling novels, to selling any IP really.
Well, you brought up a really interesting point. I was listening to you, and it really hit me. Like you kind of like just kind of sparked like a version of a light bulb in my brain with this. Is that because of AI and everything, writing as a product, as the text itself, will be meaningless. So the only way for art in general is the parasocial aspect. It's no longer a craft, it's the craftsman that's important.
Well, and just AI can't, literally AI is regurgitating absorbed opinion, so it's incapable, especially in this iteration, it's not forming independent thoughts and all that. So anyway, I just two points of agreement with you on about the cult of the author as a concept. Friend of the show, very good friend of the show, ARX Han, the other half of the Nutcell duology, he recently put out a Substack post basically saying he came to the same conclusion fairly painfully. I think he wanted to be a much more anonymous, out of sight author, and he found he only ever got any traction by getting out there and moving, particularly like posting and things like that. And the other one, agreeing with him, there was a very tragically named podcast called Six Figure Authors you can check out. These are authors who basically were successful in that first wave of self-publishing, and their business model was super Amazon ad heavy, not as much presence, not as much of that. And that model has completely collapsed. I've heard this in a few other places as well. The last 6 months to a year, the ad forward model is due to algorithm changes or flooding the market. No one's really sure, but apparently people are dropping like flies in terms of profitability that go that route.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, you can't go wrong by creating a presence and people knowing you. I mean, that's just like crucial to, not to sound like any of these kind of grifter types. But
buy my class.
You know,
buy my class.
Being part of a network, but I mean, it's true. Like, if people know you, if people know, I mean, that's true professionally. That's true in terms of like any social circle that exists, that confers power or benefits on anyone. If you have a presence, you're going to command greater power and ability than someone who does not.
But there's also a strong, I forget the exact sociology term for this, but there's the social buy-in cost that raises your value within a society, in a subculture. So within this scene, like, your life could quite easily be ruined. All of our lives could quite easily be ruined in pretty profound ways just for being associated, even though I don't think any of us have advocated anything too outlandish, except for Gabe, of course.
Nothing too based, you mean?
Yes, yeah. It is social signaling, but there's a specific type of it of when it's sort of like, it's the frat hazing concept of like, once you're on the inside of a group and you've made real sacrifices to contribute to it in a meaningful way, that creates a very strong sense of loyalty. And I think that also factors into your concept, and why I agree going forward, there's probably going to be more of these. The cult of the author will be more of a factor, and it's probably going to be more and more subculture based than it's been in the past. I mean, I think you referenced earlier, Dan, the average, literary fiction novel sells, I don't know, I forget the exact number, but it's like 500 copies or something like that.
Sub 1200
like, they really
is, if I recall correctly. Yeah. Is the trad pub version.
Yeah, exactly. Every now and then they have a hit, of course, but yeah, that's really what you should see yourself competing as. And of course, there's a legitimacy factor, which I think we're working towards, and I think it is increasing, but I don't think it's ever coming back. I think that's going down, and there's just going to be competing subcultures. That might be the next phase of this
absolutely
as a scene.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think things are becoming increasingly siloed, and I mean, you have like, to a certain extent, yes, the mainstream culture still exists. You still have, but it is breaking down, and the, popular movies, popular, music, like who can even think of anything? Like, the most popular movie of the past year is like Barbie and Oppenheimer. Well, like, they were just memes. They were popular because they were memes. And it's, it's increasingly like we don't really, and like the last, movie star is like Tom Cruise. Well, like he was in Top Gun when I was born in 1986. That was, he's pretty old, and despite how he looks. And, it's not coming back. The the kind of actor, the writer, the whomever who everyone across the culture relates to, and is like, this is a great, this is the movie star, this is the rock star, this is the great American novelist. That is not really coming back, but that offers, I think, great opportunities to people who can, capitalize upon these new models. So people who can, command an audience that has grown tired of the mainstream and wants something a bit nuttier, they can,
nice one.
Yeah,
a bit crankier.
Yeah, they can, crank something out.
Okay, well, you were talking about this kind of connection. You can answer yes or no if need be. But with this one, you were talking about how the mainstream is dying, and that as long as there's a dissonant scene, it's healthy. As long as we're just stubborn enough, right? And we admit we have very high quality bar standards, and we're just isolated from the mainstream. We bear the pain. A lot of us, I prefer being Anon, even if it wasn't for political reasons. I would prefer a pseudonym anyway. But even if we just kind of bunkered down, eventually the scene will be so sick, the mainstream, it will eventually just collapse, and we'll get, it's Yarvin's Dark Elf ideas, right?
Yeah.
So I'm very curious, in your opinion, just yes or no, how many Baltic agents are in the publishing agents? Because I know for a fact at least a handful of them are reading your stuff. There is some Baltic subversions in the mainstream reading Dime Square books.
Well, I mean, that's great. Like, I don't know about any of them.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Wait, does Dan? Do you consider yourself a Dime Square dude? Because I never thought of you that way.
Well, like I am in New York, and so like I've been to a few of the parties. I am reading at like that event next week. Botch. It's the title of the event is Botch Chatification. It's the name of the band of the the guy who's organizing it. I don't consider myself a Dime Square dude, but that's kind of like, right, no one's going to call themselves a hipster. I guess it's kind of like, do you go to the parties? Do you, like,
do you drink the beer?
Like, and I, to an extent I do. I don't as much as some, certainly. I'm like I'm really not that much of a party guy. But like I do, I mean, this is something that maybe sounds even a little sappy, but like the first time like I went to an event where I could be, like a party where I could be Dan Baltic, that was really liberating because I'm like, wait a minute, I can actually say what I believe, and I don't have to pretend to be someone else. And so like I do kind of like I wouldn't say I'm a Dime Square guy. I don't really go to these parties all that much. I'm not really very cool, but do I kind of like being able to go out in public and be Dan Baltic? Yeah, it's a rush. It feels really good.
So that was your coming out moment, where you
exactly
first went in,
came out as the Nut Man. But no, it's really like, you have an audience now too. So like
shockingly.
Yeah, well, thanks to you, actually. It's quite literally thanks to you.
Oh, well, I mean, like, to the extent I've helped, like, you deserve it. Like, this is really, like, this sidebar is some of, like, the best literary analysis I've heard of the novels coming out of our scene. So it's well-deserved. And I was going to say that, if you're at, meeting people and suddenly someone references something that, your pod or something you wrote and, and knows you by your avatar, that's just like such a powerful, it's just suddenly like I don't know. To me, it felt really cool. The first time someone was like, oh, of course I know you. I know Dan Baltic. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. Because you willed that into being. You created that. That there was no, whoever your avatar is, like there was no Tukey's mag before you started. So it's like when people like in meat space know who you are, it means that you've succeeded.
Yeah, we got a lot of grinding left to do, guys. We're not there yet.
We got a lot of grinding
left
to do.
You have been a huge help, Dan, because I think there's just something about someone, especially I think you're pretty established and known in the scene. And so when you said these guys aren't total sacks of shit, I think a lot of people perked up and like, oh, I'll give it a shot. I'll listen to these three goofballs spaz out, talk about semen, reading about books about so much semen and masturbation for the last month is ridiculous.
we stand on a mountain of nuts. That's exactly what we do.
I did just listen to your to episode 69 of New Right, featuring Mark Marlowe, who wrote the Jackalopians. And if I had known about the Jackalopians before we had embarked on Nutcell, it may have worked its way into a trilogy. And I'm a little glad because I kind of need to like take a break from books about sensitive young men for a little bit. And we do have a lot of other things in the pipeline, but I bought book today, so I'm gonna check out the Jackalopians. And maybe it'll be a sidebar episode. We'll see. I read Incel before anyone else too to get it in there. Yeah. So
It's really quite good, Jackaloppians. It's, like there's a lot of novels that come out of, well, maybe not a lot, but there are novels that come out of our scene, and obviously they are of varying quality. I will say that, like, Jackaloppians is of high quality, and there's, like, a lot of, like, funny stuff in there. So, like, and it actually is much less horny than NUTCRANKR. I mean, that's probably obvious. But yeah, I mean, there's some sex, there's some, but I mean, the thing that struck me most about Jackaloppians is I had not, and I've mentioned this to my girlfriend, to other people that I spoke about it with. I hadn't read a satire of the post-COVID era. I hadn't, and like you, obviously, it begs to be satirized or written about. Just the masks, the craziness, the BLM riots, and like this is the first piece of fiction that I've read that dealt with it. So and dealt with it very deftly. So hats off to Mark Marlowe.
So the I think that I kind of want to circle back a little bit to your most recent Substack post about traditionally horny.
Absolutely.
So I feel like, and I'm gonna get into my Spurg mode. Apologies, Gabe. More apologies, David. Actually, because but
just make a Substack post for the love of God, Cap. Just write your own post.
Okay, so here's my thought. A lot of people, I think, in the dissident right are really kind of advocating for a world that is essentially the 90s, essentially like U.S. in the 90s. Like let's form the Mennonites, except everything is dial-up internet and no one has cell phones, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is kind of rolling, and your post is kind of basically rolling things back to the 90s, right? Again, so it's advocating for like, yeah, there are gay people, and but Eddie Murphy could still lose his career for picking up a tranny prostitute, right? That's you got to keep that
more or less,
that shit on the low. So, I mean, do you think that like that form of conservatism, because we know what happened to the 90s, right? The 90s became the present. Do you feel like that form of conservatism might not actually like have a program? Just turning back the clock. How do you stop it from clicking? How do you stop it from ticking forward? Is, I guess, my question. And to what degree do you think that's sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, that is obviously a hard one. The, kind of, I do agree that the 90s were in some respects like a moment in time that represented in some respects like an ideal balance between tradition and license or what have you. But in other respects, the 90s were like not an ideal time in terms of traditional values. Like obviously, anything, not to get too political, but anything after the 1960s, various legal regimes were enacted in America that kind of, disempowered, ordinary, good people. So that, like, I think the 90s in some respects are, were not sustainable in the sense of, like, could we stop perversion from leading to where it has went to today? But in other respects, the 90s also just, weren't ideal from another perspective. So, like, where do I see the line? Like, honestly, I mean, in this essay, I was thinking more the early 60s, the 50s.
Okay.
Like, that kind of, like, I was thinking more the kind of, like, okay, yeah, the 90s, obviously, I did lead with the Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition. And like that's of course a product of the 90s. I grew up in the 90s, and that's what I'm talking about. But like in terms of what was being like publicly celebrated versus what was being kept under wraps, I feel like kind of the Mad Men era, that is probably more ideal. That, you know, kind of like traditional, like, but you know, regardless, like during the, you know, the 50s, the 60s, the Beats were doing their thing. The, you know, they're always in any kind of culture, there is a, you know, a degenerate element that's, you know, doing perverted stuff. And I don't think, like, I mean, I'm not, certainly not very political here in the sense of like prescribing, like, this is what I think the laws should be, the legal agenda, etc. But yeah, I do think the 90s are probably too far along in terms of legally and politically to have avoided where we are today. But I do think the early 60s and certainly the culture of the 70s, maybe not the, like, I think the legal regime had been enacted by the 70s that would, you know, lead to disaster. But I think that the overall kind of like culture, and in some respects, actually, you could suggest that the overall culture in the 80s, yeah, the 80s, the 90s, like the kind of like the American understanding of itself, the culture, I think it was pretty healthy in the 80s and the 90s. It just, you know, unfortunately it was like Wile E. Coyote, you know, running out, and they didn't understand that they'd run off the cliff already. And it's like, oh yeah, we're like Top Gun, we're True Lies, Terminator, and everything. But they don't realize that, you know, there's no ground beneath your feet, and you're about to fall into off a cliff. So yeah, I mean, like, I think how, like, politically, how do you handle that? Well, you don't do the stuff that happened in the 60s, that happened legally in the 60s.
Yeah, there's a guy named William E. Reese I heard speak on morality in reference to like environmentalism, and he had a comment that we consume the benefits of past morality in a similar way that we consume like healthy topsoil and other environmental wealth, in that
absolutely, yeah.
You know, hits pipe, someone has to like raise that girl from age 0 to 18, and, you know, and raise her with good morals and all that, and be healthy so that you can, you know, the rest of the hit pipe meme. And this is like a bounty that's grown up through time. And at this point, yeah, to you guys' point, that 90s era, that was already starting to kind of wobble. And at this point, we're seeing the consequences of basically when no one is doing that good job. And there's this, we don't have that, there's the topsoil has been scraped bare, and it's almost like that's why I suspect there's going to be generations of probably reverting probably further than is the healthiest balance of those two things to sort of an ultra conservatism, I suspect.
Yeah.
To rebuild.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the Zoomers or the whatever the hell is after the Zoomers, but I feel like there's got to be like a less principled reactionary drive somewhere in there, right?
Oh, trust me, the Zoomer violists will take over. There will be a Zoomers warlord with a bustin' ass haircut.
God, it's gonna be Gabe. Fuck.
Warlord Gabe.
Yes, much like Muhammad in his Quran, I will ride an elephant to New York with a copy of NUTCRANKR under the holy name of Lord Baltic. I'll claim America again.
Thank you. Please take back New York for me.
Yes. Based Brooklyn will be real.
I hope so.
I would like to close out, as we did our episode, by putting my last question to Dan. Fuck, marry, kill for Crystal, Nora, and Lauren.
Perfect.
Who's it gonna be?
Bravo.
Jeez. I mean, that's a tough one. Damn. Well, okay. So, I mean, Mary, it's definitely got to be Nora because she's the most, I mean, she's beautiful. She has status. She's, the type of person you want to be with. So yeah, I mean, like, Mary is Nora. Fuck, like, okay, like, if I'm really, like, from a pure horny perspective, fuck is probably Lori. Like, those wide birthing hips, like, that is something that, like, I got pretty horny writing about Lori. But that being said,
and her steamy vagina.
Climb that mountain.
Exactly.
Climb that mountain.
That being said, I do have enough affection, and I'm enough of a soft touch that I could not kill Crystal because I wrote about her and she became like a part of the novel.
Kill your darlings, Dan. Kill your darlings. One of them has to die.
I'm gonna kill Lori and I will fuck Crystal because old Crystal's still a good fuck. I mean,
okay.
She got it on.
Technically, FMK does not. You don't need to choose different ones. Technically.
Oh,
what do you think about that? Yeah, just choose one sacrificial lamb, basically.
Here we go.
marry, fuck, and kill.
Just have nothing to do with the other two. Just yeah.
Yeah, Crystal has. I think she could have been a good person in a better world.
Yeah.
Whereas Laurie, I would agree. Yeah, she is more. She would have been a sort of a nasty school marm in another era. Anyway.
Yeah, like, I meant to show that Crystal has, like, at the end of the day, a bit of a good heart. So yeah, and I didn't intend to show that with Laurie. So good catch.
Did she ever love Spencer, a part of her, or was it just the good-naturedness of her?
I think more the good-naturedness. Like, I don't think, like, could she have loved him? I mean, the thing is, like, she didn't really know who he was, right? So, like,
True.
yeah, even if she did love him, she didn't love the real Spencer Grunhauer.
She just knew the grift.
Exactly.
The grind.
Oh, anything you want to chill to our audience that's like 100th the size of yours, Dan?
Yeah. I'll show, like, obviously, buy NUTCRANKR, get that nut. It is available on Terror House's website, published by Terror House Press, available on their website. It is available on Amazon, of course. NUTCRANKR, that does not have an E at the end. It's NUTCRANKR. No E.
There will be a link in the description. Do not worry.
Good to know. Go to my Substack, danbaltic.substack.com. I have my recently published and very popular essay, Traditionally Horny, on there, as well as a short story called The Doxing Dom, which has some very delicious descriptions of breasts. So that's, worth it alone.
Great short story.
Thank you, Gabe. And in addition to that, New Right. I am the co-host of New Right podcast. So New Right is available on Apple Pod, Spotify, wherever, as they say, wherever podcasts are found. So thank you. And again, thank you guys for having me on. Thank you for taking the time to read NUTCRANKR and think about it and do a pod on it. Like, honestly, this has been some of the best analysis of NUTCRANKR that I've read and heard. So I'm honored to have you guys have done that. And also thank you for doing the your stream in general, because every time someone puts together something that is like intelligent and engaging on our side of the internet, it's it's a gift to the people who want to listen to it.
And I think it'll help people find it. And it's just one of our goals was to have good YouTube hits for the things our guys are putting out. And honest, I think hopefully we're come across as we've killed some darlings on our way to here. And so hopefully that's earned us the credibility that people who followed us for more than a minute will trust us when I say I co-sign what you said, Dan. I highly recommend picking up NUTCRANKR through that friendly affiliate link. Go ahead, turn off those pesky ad block as well, and get yourself a copy of NUTCRANKR and give those the sidebar boys a couple pennies to buy Christmas presents this year. And I've been following you, Dan, as an anon for well over a year. So it was really, truly a treat to actually get a chance to say hi and chat in person for a minute here.
Absolutely.
And with all that said, I think we spent this nut. I think it's on the floor. It's on our stomachs. It's in a napkin.
We have to enter our refractory period for another 2 weeks.
Yeah,
but we will.
It's
be
a crusty crank
again.
now.
Until then, good night. Thank you.
Guys.
Night.
Peace.
Much like Muhammad in his Quran, I will ride an elephant to New York with a copy of NUTCRANKR. Under the holy name of Lord Baltic, I'll claim America again.